who doesn't know Batman? And with the new movie coming out, I thought it'd be cool to make something in that theme. So after looking at the trailer for like the millionth time, I thought I'd create a scene inspired by this part of the trailer. And this is what we got. But that's enough blabbering for today. Let's cue the intro. Since we aren't working from any reference image in specific, I'll start off by bringing in my human scale mannequin right from the start. I'll add in a plane which we'll use to block out our scene. We'll use it to create the floor of the sewers, and I'll duplicate it a few times to get an interesting layout of the area. Once I'm happy with the floor layout, I extrude down one of the edges to make the drop off where the water passes through in the sewers. And with another plane, I'll begin blocking out my walls too. I also start adjusting the camera to get what I want my composition to more or less look like. I also thought to add a staircase, but I also wanted an archway in the entrance leading to the staircase. So using a plane, I made the staircase, and using the spin tool and another plane, I modeled the arch. But that's not for the blocking really. I now move on to the modeling. To start, I'll get a cube and scale it to more or less the size of the cement tiles I want, bevel the edges and array it to make it seem like the floor is broken up into sections, and also do the same thing for the back floor. From there, I move on to the concrete beams that run along the top of the walls. Okay, look, I'ma be honest, I don't know if concrete beam is a thing. I don't know what it's called. I just made it up, right? I made it using the same technique as the concrete floor tiles. The only difference is that I added a mirror modifier to get it running across both sides of the wall. See, it looks like a beam, but it's made of concrete block looking thingies. Guys, just trust me, I'm not making this up. I'm not crazy, I swear. To get the art to interact with the wall properly, I'll give it some thickness, then trace it along its general area and use it as a boolean cutter to punch a hole, giving us our entrance archway. And by duplicating the general outline again, I used it to make the walls and ceilings of the stairways, and using some simple modeling, I moved the hallway up to match the stairs. Now this wouldn't be a sewer without a ceiling, so let's add that, and a curved one at that. I'll do that by taking a single vertice, spinning it around to get the arch, and then extruding it down the hall. With our sewer hall now covered, I looked at it and thought it looked a bit bare, so I duplicated the ceiling, scaled it, and extruded it to make archways that perfectly follow the curvature of the ceiling but run down the walls to give us some cool arch designs. I was looking at the ceiling and thought that it was looking a bit flat, so I decided to use the same technique I've been using to make the beams and the floor by scaling, extruding, beveling, and arraying. Then I thought, what else do sewers have? Pipes, and using some cylinders, I began adding pipes everywhere, and by adding a few loop cuts, I was able to give them some designs like the parts that extrude out or are sunken in pipes. And with that done, I thought I'd test out the lighting by giving the water plane a reflective material, turning the world light off, and adding a single point light colored red. And after some quick testing, I thought it would be better to bring in Copper instead, since he was going to be here for the render. But before continuing, I decided to quickly pose him and give him an angry Batman-like expression. And with that, I move on to UV editing. And if you don't know what this is, it's basically flattening out our 3D models into a 2D shape so that we're able to wrap a texture around the model properly. Yeah, this process can get real freaky when you go from seeing your model like this to it looking like this. For this, I'll create a 4K UV grid texture which I will apply to all my objects as I unwrap them, and this will let me see if I'm doing a good job or a bad job. And I'll know if I'm headed in the right direction if the squares in my textures look like squares. You tend to forget what squares look like when you see this for hours on end as you sort this whole mess out. As I UV unwrap my object, you'll see me adding these red lines, which are called seams. These basically tell Blender where to cut the object as it flattens it. I mainly add these along the top and bottom of objects and along one of their sides, or wherever the faces take a sharp turn like a corner. And after doing this nightmare, we're left with this. From here, we'll start by adding our textures. The floor will get this concrete material, and the walls will get this stone wall material, which if you remember is the same one we used for the Temple of Time. This stone wall material will also be applied to the arches and ceiling, whilst the concrete beams will get a concrete material. As for the pipes, I'll give them a metallic material and I'll mix it in with some grunge black and white texture to give them a nice old feel and layer it in with some scratches for extra details. Then using another grunge map, I'll use it as a mask to give the pipes some rust. All the other pipes get basically the same material, but to prevent them from looking all the same, I'll use the random socket of an object info node connected to a hue saturation to give each pipe a slightly different color. Now don't ask me why, but for some reason I decided to move on away from texturing and onto scattering pebbles along the ground, because apparently that's more interesting. To do this, I'll bring in some pebble meshes and add a plane and shape it more or less like our floor is shaped, and we'll use that to distribute the pebbles using geometry nodes. To start, I'll distribute points along the floor and lower the amount of points there are. Then, using an instance to point node, we can distribute and scale our pebbles. I wanted each pebble to have a different size, so I brought in a random value node and told it was the minimum and maximum size the pebbles are allowed to have. But the pebbles weren't enough, so I brought in an old paper decal, cut it into 4 pieces, and using the same method, I distributed on the floor, but I did something extra. I gave each paper a random rotation, and to add to the detail train, I decided to apply this leaky grunge material to a plane and began duplicating them and placing them along the walls and water edges. At the time, I thought this was a good idea, but it turns out it wasn't, because then the leak would not adjust to the normals of the wall, so it just ended up looking off. So while you might see me do this here, I end up scrapping it in the end and just applying the grunge right onto the material, the wall and concrete. But now it was time for the water. To do it, I'll use a noise node and a color ramp, and I'll use that to create a black and white texture of what I want the water to look like. Then I plug that into a bump node and we got our water, after lowering the roughness of course. Then I play with the scale till I'm happy. But I didn't only want the water there, I also wanted it to be distorted by where the pipe touched the water. So I used that custom AO map, and this gave us a mask where the pipe and the water meet, and I mixed it with a wave texture in a bump node, and we can get this cool ripple effect. Then to give our walls a bit more grime, I used yet another grunge texture and threw it in here to help dirty up the walls. And for a bit of extra detail, I used the Bolt Factory add-on to give the pipes that enter the water some bolts along the edge. But now came time to turn our cute little copper friend into a dark brooding crime fighting machine. I'll color him a dark gray, and using a black and white bat symbol layered in with some grunge, I'll use it to make the bat symbol. I also connected to the normal to make the bat symbol pop out a bit. But he wouldn't be a Cape Crusader without a cape. But now came one of my biggest nightmares. Cloth. So I decided to suck it up and start. To start, I added a plane, and then with some simple modeling and loop cuts, I was able to get the general Batman cape shape. And using some cloth simulation, I was able to get the cape to look like a cape. But that won't be all that's necessary to make the cape look like cloth, so I'll also need a cloth material. And using this cloth texture, we can get the cape looking more or less like a cape. For the eyes, however, I didn't really know what color to give him till I remember that Batman usually has white eyes. So I gave him the typical white Batman eyes. And we're almost done, but we're missing one crucial thing, the flare. This is the only light source apart from the white light that I placed behind the character to get a nice rim light. The flare isn't complex, it's just a cylinder with some extrusions at the top and bottom and a hole where the flare comes out of. And speaking of it, I'll make it by using a subdivided cube with a displacement modifier to get a good random looking shape. As for the material of the flare canister thingy, I gave it a black metal material, and for the actual flare fire, I gave it an emissive red material. And to finish off our scene, I'll add in a cube with a volume material to get some nice volumetric lighting going. But with that, it concludes this scene, which was quite fun to make, to be honest. I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for sticking around, and if you made it this far, comment Martha in the comments, ask the like button why did he say that name, and make the subscribe button tell you where the other drugs are going. And don't forget to press the notification bell to get notified when my next video dropped. Feel free to check out some of my other videos too, like this Temple of Time one. But with that said, take care, goodbye, and God bless.